Negative space, by definition, is empty space around an object or form and is also called white space. In logo design, however, negative space tends to be the primary term that we use. The positive area of a piece of art can be regarded as a filled or outlined area. It's a positive area which has substance instead of seeming nothingness. That nothingness, however, is something, since every positive shape will always have negative shapes around it. It's the negative space which forms the positive shape and vice versa. Each component of this dualistic principle cannot exist without the other, much like yin and yang, which is a symbol which represents the mandatory, complementary presence of both light and dark in the universe. As logo designers, we are artists, and it's pinnacle for an artist to identify with negative space. Seeing negative space involves learning to see in a fresh way. Mastering use of negative space is just like a musician embracing silence to give further feel to their notes. Together, both the presence of the notes and the absence of them make the overall musical piece. Without silence, there is a drone, and without notes, there is a silence. In the following lectures, we're going to explore the different ways in which we can use negative space in our logos to create more interesting and diverse pieces of work. In logo design, it's ever important to avoid relying upon colour, especially when it's used in an effort to hide bad design form. Above all, it's crucial that we don't rely upon colour to differentiate shapes. That's to say, we should never put shapes together and assume that we can separate them by colouring them differently. This is because a logo is not always displayed in colour. There are many different applications for a logo, from black and white print to material cutouts for signage purposes. With this in mind, all shapes in a logo design must be distinguished clearly, not by colour, but by negative space. Negative space is essentially the gaps we place between shapes so that each will be distinguished no matter what the application. So to demonstrate this principle, here we have a symbol which I've created for a furniture company. It's a symbol which represents an abstract armchair. Here we have the back of the armchair, the shape up here, and the shape at the bottom is the bottom cushion of the armchair, and of course we have the two arms at the side. Now each of these shapes, as you can see, is coloured a different colour. We have the peach here, we have the pink here, and we have grey for the arms at either side there. Now, those colours have been used mostly to separate the elements. As you can see, we have a bit of negative space here, but all in all, these shapes are being separated by their colours. Now this will become clear when I highlight this and colour it one single colour. I'll choose black, and you'll see that this shape at the bottom in particular merges with these two arms. Now the symbol as a whole now has lost its meaning. We don't see that this is entirely separated from this shape. It's actually merged in the middle, and of course this shape here is now merged with these two arms at either side. Now this is typically a case of using colour to distinguish the shapes as mentioned. Now to remedy this, we now need to separate these elements. So first of all, we're going to start with the top portion of this armchair, and we're going to move it upwards like so. That's a large enough gap, not too narrow and not too wide. And next I'm going to use the right arrow key on the keyboard to move across the right hand arm of the armchair graphic, and I'm counting each press of the key so that I can do exactly the same on the left hand side. So I've counted 14 key presses here. This is also the same number of key presses I've used to separate the top portion of the graphic from the bottom as previously seen. So now on the left hand side, using the same number of keyboard key presses, using the left arrow. So we're going to count exactly the same so that we have gaps which are equal throughout the graphic. That looks nice. So I'm going to copy this across. I'm going to see how this looks at smaller sizes. And that looks good. You can see now that each shape of this symbol is now distinguished and it doesn't rely upon color. So this is now suitable for a variety of applications. We see every shape in this symbol. So bringing the original back in, I'm just going to paste that in. And we can highlight each shape, use the eyedropper tool and just match these colors up. And highlighting those arms, holding shift, using the eyedropper tool and matching the arms up. And so, making the small copy again just for review purposes. And we'll see that still functions very well in colour. I'm making a copy and we'll colour it black just to review that once again in the single colour. You'll see this image is now perfect. And as mentioned, it's suitable for a variety of applications now that each shape of the symbol has been distinguished with negative space. So to further demonstrate the use of negative space to separate shapes, here we have a symbol of a mountain range with a sun behind. Now this image consists of 4 elements. Firstly, the sun. Next, the mountain shape, and the 2 pieces here which represent the snow on the right hand side of each mountain. Now, if this was to be coloured a single colour, I'm going to show you the result, and I'm going to choose black. This is what happens. Everything is merged into a single non-cohesive shape. We no longer see the sun, we see the mountain shapes, but we can't make anything out and the snow is completely lost. So in order to remedy this, we need to use negative space to separate each element and to cut out certain elements so that this displays effectively in a single colour so that it's suitable for all applications. So let's just go ahead and take a copy of this and we'll bring it down. Now we're going to work on this so that the sun is separate from the mountains and so that the snow shapes are cut out from the mountain shape. So selecting the first and the second, holding shift and selecting the mountain shape, I'm going to go to the Pathfinder panel and beneath shape modes I'm going to click -front. Now if I put a shape behind this of a different colour, you'll see the effect. Instead of those being shapes on the mountain, they're now cut out. Now you'll see no matter what the background colour, those snow shapes on the mountain peaks retain the form. They're absolutely visible. So the next thing to do is to make this sun a separate shape so that it doesn't merge with the mountain shape when it's coloured a single colour. So what we're going to do is we're going to select no fill. And we're going to select stroke, just colour that white so it's visible, and we'll use the pen tool. We'll click here, holding shift to lock on to the horizontal, make another here, and following the same angle as this mountain here, we're going to click another line, like so, holding shift and selecting the sun, whilst that stroke's selected. If we go to the Pathfinder panel, beneath Pathfinders, we go to divide, we click upon that, and it cuts that sun shape into 2. And selecting this piece here, and pressing backspace on the keyboard, this is the result. Now the sun is a separate shape from the mountains. Now if this is coloured a single colour now, this is the result. Everything retains its form. Here you'll see the sun, here you'll see the mountain shape, and we have the snow shapes on each. So to summarise, this is how we employ negative space to separate shapes of a symbol. We've also seen how we cut out shapes so that the image retains its desired aesthetic across all forms of application. Negative space can be employed to create depth. That's to say, we can use it to give the impression that some elements are behind or in front of each other. Firstly, let's take a look at this basic symbol consisting of 3 leaves. You'll see that through use of negative space, a gap between each leaf, that we create an effect of a leaf in the background, a leaf in the foreground, and a leaf between. Of course, this arrangement could be achieved by using colour, but we lose the feel entirely if a single colour is applied to the symbol. What's more, the large gaps lend a more apparent and prominent effect. So this is one example of how we can utilise negative space to give a feel of depth. In this example, we see a series of 3 faces arranged in a similar manner, one behind the other in a clover style shape. Despite the fact that we have a face in the background, one in the foreground and one in the middle, there's actually only one face which consists of a solid shape. The others depend upon negative space for their formation. The overall symbol too consists of only 2 parts, and it's from these parts the negative cutouts yield 2 of the faces which appear in depth from front to back. This symbol stands as a brilliant example of how we can not only utilise negative space for the sake of separation to give depth, but to also give form to the separation. It shows that negative space can be just as important as solid elements, while being completely dependent upon each other. In this logo, I wanted to create a symbol for infinity, which is the figure of 8 on the horizontal. To satisfy curiosity, I chose this symbol as part of this logo, which was designed for a market research company to represent ongoing analysis. The circular shapes represent pie charts and pupils of eyes, which altogether form owl eyes, which forever keep watch over the market. So going back to the design, I wanted to give the impression that part of the figure of 8 was at the rear, so that the band appeared to be going behind itself. To create this element of depth, I used negative space to give separation, which in turn suggested part of the band to be at the front and part at the rear. Executed correctly with just enough space so that the division is visible to its small sizes, the effect manages to achieve this well without suggesting that the band is meant to appear cut. You'll see the importance of negative space placement if we take a look at a version of the symbol which is without it. Here you'll see that we lose all quality of depth and the band of the figure of 8 appears at the forefront, losing suggestion that part of it is behind itself. So you'll see that placement of the negative space in this instance has given separation, which in turn has given depth simply by removing part of the shape. It's this kind of simple innovation which we always have at our disposal. Negative space is something which we should always hold in high regard, since it can be used to give a new dimension and greater meaning to a design. Negative space isn't just useful for making a graphic within a positive element, it can be used to suggest a highlighted surface too, where no elements exist. With suitable placement of positive elements, the negative spaces can seemingly take on substance. Take this symbol for instance, which is composed of 3 shapes. The letter E would stand effectively on its own. However, with a simple addition of the 2 squares in perspective to the left, we can see the letter H. Where there was previously nothing in the sense of the word, we now see the face of the H in direct light. This effect depends upon the vertical stem of the E to establish the right hand stem of the H, and the 2 positive squares suggest the left stem of the H. In a similar fashion, this example sees a rectangle with 2 negative shapes. Although simple in form, these two shapes bring another dimension to the overall visual. By introduction of the two negative shapes, the symbol is transformed into a profile view of a step. The two negative shapes now represent the highlighted horizontal planes, and the positive space between represents the vertical of the step. As if this effect isn't good enough within its own right, the overall shape also forms an S for stairs to give the symbol a double entendre. In this final example, we can see how this logo symbol too utilises positive shapes to depict shadowing. This brings out substance of the negative space which is otherwise without purpose. Here we see figurative light cast upon the stand, which is also the letter M, the fascia of the camera and the lens. A total of 7 positive shapes have seemingly composed a 3D object. So these examples represent the power of negative space to depict a lit surface when used in conjunction with positive space to depict shadow. Both positive and negative space give power to the next, giving a symbol deep substance by way of minimalism. Negative space isn't only applied to graphical elements, we can also utilise negative space in the text of a logo. The text and the negative space in most cases might be the logo itself. The logo might utilise an existing font, or characters might be drawn from scratch. As you'll see from these examples, there are two approaches to incorporating negative space within text. The negative space can either depict a character of the word or a graphic strategically fathomed by utilising the form of characters in the word. In the case of graphics, they may be subtle or they may be a little bit more elaborate. Negative space characters too might be very simplistic or elaborate in their presentation. In either approach, it's crucial that the concept is effective whilst keeping the legibility of the logo unhindered. In many cases, the negative space needs to be as apparent as the positive space. So when we come to the development stage of a logo and our options are open to explore text-based logos, it's a great idea to analyse the form of characters in a company name. A logo design needn't be complex. It's been said many times before, simplicity is key. A fantastic text-based, negative space logo design can be established by simply adding and or subtracting a few shapes to or from an existing font. It's a great idea to take advantage of our sketch pads to play with concepts and letter forms. Effective planning and analysis reduces the workload and the execution. So to summarise, we should always be aware that the characters themselves usually hold a great deal of potential for us to come up with an innovative, simple and effective design solution.